Howdy, my howl from beyonds. It is Mansant, joined of course by my partner in crime, Levia, here to bring you the second video in the Blitz versus series, this time versus Ira, who, as we all know, has been a mainstay threat in the meta ever since the format was introduced back in Crucible of War. So I'm going to add a new segment today where we actually jump into the Ira deck and talk about some things we need to think about before getting into the match at all. So apologies, I didn't include that in the Dorinthia video, might re-upload it, but quick reminder to just hit that subscribe button to stay up to date to all the videos coming out in this series, because there will be a ton. We're looking at about 22 in total. So with that, let's jump into it. Alrighty, everybody, welcome to the Ira overview portion of the video where we talk about specifically what Ira threatens us as the Levia player with. So this isn't going to be an overview about what Ira can do overall, but rather what we need to be scared of as Levia players. So the main thing we want to avoid in this matchup is what is known as the Kodachi lock scenario. So Levia, as we know, is a hero that normally has to keep at least 2 cards once she's committed to turning off Blood Debt each turn because, well, she needs to turn off Blood Debt each turn or she loses. So Ira, in a late game scenario, is able to keep 2 cards and normally threaten 1 damage with the first Harmonized Kodachi swing, 2 damage on the second Harmonized Kodachi swing, and then with that second card in hand, she gets to present another attack. Now, if you're ever locked at 1 HP in these endgame scenarios, you are pretty much dead to rights, because if you have to block with 3 cards, you're going to lose to Blood Debt anyway. So we don't want this to happen, and that means we need to put on enough pressure to our Ira opponent that she feels compelled to block with more cards, whether we're presenting lethal or just presenting a ton of damage, and that way she doesn't get to be as aggressive as she wants back into us and threaten our life total. Now, luckily, we have some things going for us anyway for that gameplay plan, and that is the Carrion Husk. Carrion Husk can gain a ton of value at the right moment in this matchup because she can buff a lot of her attacks to very critical breakpoints that you can just cover up anyway with a Carrion Husk. Now, the other way to compete with her strategy here is to interrupt her ability to draw with Mask of Momentum. Now, Mask of Momentum, most of us know this card, but if 3 attacks of hers in a row hit, she will draw a card, and this card draw can give her untold amounts of value, whether she commits Snapdragon Scalers to giving her attack go again and going even wider with that card draw, or if that card draw then enables her to play something like Razor Reflex, or if that card draw lets her pump more damage with Exude or pitch for the Command and Conquer, whatever. The scenarios go on and on with what she can do with an extra card, so we really are always scared of the Mask of Momentum. Now this means we have to interact with her attacks, but we are fine with this because we're a deck that wants to block anyway. So normally you don't block the first Kodachi, you block the second Kodachi to gain more value because it's buffed up to 2 anyway, and that will interrupt her ability to have these untold amounts of damage. So that's the main thing we need to think about going into the Levia matchup. Just be aggressive. Don't play slow and let her be on the front foot and get you into the Kodachi lock phase. Now, the last thing to note here is that normally you also want to track how many Flick Flacks she's used. And Flick Flack is a card she normally runs 6 of, the reds, yellows, and blues. And Flick Flack is a card that gets incredible value on your Blood Rush turns. So if you're going for a Blood Rush, and it's your first Blood Rush later in the game, and you see that she's used like 1 red, 1 yellow, you saw her pitch both blues, whatever it is, then your Blood Rush is probably pretty safe to get really good value. However, if they've been sitting on an arsenal for a long time and you've seen that they've been very patient with it, it is perhaps a Flick Flack and is really going to interrupt your Blood Rush turn. Now, you can try to bait these out by going for longer plans where you just Arsenal Blood Rush and try to draw out Arsenal cards of hers if you haven't seen them played yet, but this doesn't always work. Everything about Levia is contextual, but my main tip here is just track the Flick Flacks, because if you've seen none and then you just go in for like a blind Blood Rush, you will probably not push anywhere near the amount of damage you need to for this matchup. So with that, let's see how the best of 3 went. Alrighty, jumping into the gameplay here, gonna try to not just yap away for an hour here, so if you guys want to turn on some music, kick back, and just enjoy a gameplay with a bit of a slower commentary today. What we see here is that critical die roll to kick us off, and I really want to choose to go first in this matchup. And this is because Ira is just a mind game machine when they get to go first. They can just lead with something as simple as 1 Kodachi, and if you decide not to block it, they can just end their turn there. And if you decide to block it, then they can go harder with the rest of their hand, and because you committed an entire card to blocking just 1, you will take damage. So going second against Ira, just a little too tricky for it to be worth it, so I'd rather go first. You know, my Levia deck is built to have better turn 1 plays, so looking at the hand here, looks like nothing too optimal has opened up here. I believe I've got 3 reds and a blue Deadwood, so just going to filter what I can. The Deadwood would just be too expensive to play on this hand, so I'm going to Arsenal that Sink Below, which is a nice setup. But I am unfortunately going to play into an Ira with 23 life because Tom had that Sigil in the opening hand. Now, I do have Arcanite Skullcap in this matchup. It's very critical in blocking the Kodachis so that Mask of Momentum doesn't hit 3, like I mentioned in the intro to this. So with that Sigil, I am available to block with the Arcanite here, so we'll see how the turn goes. Tom just opening with the very straightforward start to most Ira plays, which is Kodachi for 1. But then this is where he spices it up a bit. Instead of a Kodachi for 2, he's trying to make the breakpoint on Snatch a little bit harder. Now Snatch is coming in for 5, and if I don't block it and just think, oh, it doesn't have go again, his turn's over, he can get really punishing with the Snapdragons even as early as turn 1, and potentially threaten a Husk like right off the gate. So I believe that's kind of the line he's thinking for here, but as Levia, I am pretty happy to just overblock on the Snatch, so he's not going to get that bait off that he hoped for. So there goes some of my graveyard on the way to being filled. So it goes into my turn here, and now I've still just got more cards that I want to get out of my hand. So since it would just be a turn where I swing Claws, not much is lost here to just try to roll Scab Skins and potentially push another Claw swing. The game's like really early, so 1 wouldn't be too punishing. So just going to overpitch here, get those cards out of my hand. I don't really want them right now. I believe it's a Blue Dread Screamer and a red, so just want those on the bottom because Ira tends to be a longer game, so we're just going to draw into more fodder that I'd rather block with, because you don't really want to block with Dread Screamers, right? They're amazing cards. So going to draw right back up into a hand here. Tom is going to have blocked and use the breaking skills as well. So he's opening the breaking skills up to potentially be used as early as now. So now that threat is just on the table. So looking at his hand, of course, he can do the Kodachi thing. You're going to see this probably every turn. So there he goes, leads with the Kodachi. The first one you normally can just take because, I mean, in theory, right, it's like a 20-turn clock if you just take it every turn. But it's not a huge deal because if you commit anything to blocking it, then you're losing a lot of value on cards that are better blocked on things that deal more damage, like that second Kodachi or anything after the fact. So there he comes with the Kodachi Exude. And of course Exude, he could potentially double pump here. So that would push some damage. It's not going to threaten the Mask of Momentum, so I'm not overly afraid of what he can do with this Exude here. And if he double pumps, then he doesn't get Arsenal, so I'm just going to value block, and if he chips some damage, so be it. Yep, and it looks like I do have a Blood Rush in hand as well, but it might just be too early to try to Blood Rush right now. So I'm just not going to go for that line. I'd rather put Blood Rush back on the bottom because it is just not worth going for this early. My Arsenal is a defense reaction, and that's really what the issue is in trying to go for a Blood Rush like this. If your Arsenal is just a dead card like that on your aggro turns, you risk just wasting a ton of Blood Rush damage potential. Like if that's an attack, then of course I always go for Blood Rush here, but I'm not set up to do that. And we can see the life difference is just massive right now because he got another Sigil, found that Sigil, and now it puts him at 26. I really have not presented a lot of damage here, but keeping that Blood Rush lets me at least start swinging with something. I believe that is a Hungering Slaughter Beast coming in for 7. So it is quite a chunk of damage, but he's about to have a Tunic turn here, so getting pretty worried on my end, honestly. And looks like Blood Debt obviously turned off. Didn't have enough misses anyway. This video was also filmed before I got some dice together to start tracking Blood Debt and all that, so do apologize. These were filmed back to back. The next round of videos will be even more tuned up. Yep, so now into Tom's turn. He's got, should remember to take up Tunic. I was reminding my opponents quite a bit because I don't want them to, not do what their decks are supposed to do. So there we go. Just it's all good. Tick up the Tunic late. No big deal. So he's going to lead with the Kodachi. Of course, I definitely take this. I'm looking at my hand and deciding what this rest of the turn is going to be, because now I do have some blood debt racked up. I potentially went for this a little bit too early, because now I'm forced to start turning it off or I'm going to lose some value. Whereas if I held back that last turn and blocked with the Hungering and just pitched the Blood Rush for a Claw, I'm not under threat to turn off blood debt this turn. So debatable whether that line was right, but he surprises me here with just a Crane Dance coming in, because that doesn't have Go again. So I'm thinking he must have a Razor. So is it worth overblocking just so that it doesn't hit? But I mean, I do have the Sync, so if he Razors it, then we're totally fine with that. And the other thing to consider with a Sync below here is that I do want to set up my arsenal with something more aggressive. So I really want to get this Sync out of there, especially when my hand is, I believe it's 2 different attacks. So I want to at least attack with one of those because I'm going to turn off Blood Debt and then set up the other in arsenal for potentially the Blood Rush. So I really want this Sync gone, but he's just not giving me good attacks to use it against. Obviously, I couldn't use it against the Exude, and the Crane Dance is only coming in for 1. So just kind of teetering back and forth on whether or not to use it. And of course, if I do Sync and if he uses Razor, then of course I can Sync, but I would like the Sync out anyway. So just back and forth, thinking about things. And as we see in Tom's hand, he's obviously going for the Crane Dance because he can get the Find Center hit, which is, I mean, yes, it's something you can go for. I don't know if it's like too important in this matchup, but he's accurately playing into the fact that I actually want a really aggressive turn this next turn. So if he does get that Zen token off, I will just not deal as much damage as I should. So funny enough, it's actually going to line up really well for him. Yep, so this block choice is really tough. We've got the Eye of Ophidia, we've got the Doomsday, Sync below and Arsenal, obviously, and I want to get one of those non-blocks out of the hand. So it's going to be that Doomsday put back on the bottom, because it just doesn't do a lot right now. Too early for me to cast it, and if I believe my hand is actually, what is there, a Blood Rush in there? Once again, I recorded these before I actually was going to do the hand cam thing, so I'm not holding the cards exactly like I should be, but once again, the next videos, this will all be much easier to follow. So yeah, Find Center coming in. He's going to get that Zen token because I just can't block with anything that costs 4 or less. But funny enough, I actually have Soul Harvest in the deck, so that could block the Find Center. I mean, it's not going to happen here, obviously, but I'm really not too unhappy about that turn. I did kind of waste the Sync below value, but he didn't present that much damage. I get to keep Husk. It's really critical. And then we go into my turn and see what the play is. Yep, so Sigil, great card to see. If he had threatened the Husk Pop, it would have been great for me because I had that Sigil to pump myself back above that health threshold. But here we go. I am going to go for Blood Rush. And this is debatably just incorrect because I don't have the attack in Arsenal, so I'm hoping for a lot off the top here. But when I have the Eye of Ophidia in hand with a Blood Rush without something good in Arsenal, I tend to just play the Blood Rush blind because the Eye of Ophidia can at least help you craft a little bit more of what you're going to draw into. So right here, I believe I see the Convulsions blue, and then I believe the other card was an attack, like a Writhing Beast Hulk or something. So just wondering what we can do here. The other card in hand is obviously going to get discarded because I have to pay the cost of Blood Rush once the eye resolves here. So that's getting discarded anyway. I'm going to draw into those 2 cards, which is a blue and a Writhing Beast Hulk, pretty sure. So not a great turn by any means, especially playing into the Zen State token, but Tom's last play was so awkward with that Zen State. I kind of forced myself into just a really strange line that's getting punished here because he takes the 1 less each time with that Zen State. So yeah, very, very poor Blood Rush turn. Honestly, weighing what my options were, where I could just not turn off Blood Debt, block out his turn with more cards from hand, and just set something up anew, probably the better play. Because I'm missing an entire claw swing here with no arsenal, so I'm just completely on the back foot now. But he's going to decide to block some of that. He's really not taking a lot at all, right? Because that Zen State's still coming through big. So on the back foot now, I also whiffed on the Blood Debt banish with that Writhing Beast Hulk. So that was just an really, really, really bad turn for me. Luckily, I'm not breaking the husk just yet because that sigil did put me back up to be able to tank the Blood Debt hit. But that turn was just really poorly played, honestly, and just not rewarded at all either. So very, very poor play. So Tom going in, pushing lots of damage. Yep, so when he presents a threshold like that, and I still have Husk up, it's absolutely correct to just go ahead, use it. He chose the go again there, just to pump it up to 6. Not sure why, honestly. The better play for more damage would have been... oh, I see, he's got another attack on the end. Yeah, look at that. Command and Conquer coming in for 6 at the end there, but I don't have an arsenal anyway, so I'm just going to block to give myself the best value I want with that hand. So there we go. We've both kind of reset our arsenals here, which I'm feeling pretty decent about. I was able to keep 3 cards and really not take too much that turn because my Husk saved me a ton of health. So got the Howl in the Banished Zone here. I blocked with it really early on one of the Kodachi swings. So it being in the Banished Zone is a great setup for when I've got bigger hands. And this is a really, really great hand. When you've got the Howl set up, the Boneyard, and a blue, then that is 9 damage off 2 cards. It's another really strong play line similar to like an Endless Maw. So now I'm back on the front foot because that play is just so strong, right? 9 damage off 2 cards, and I've kept a 3rd card to put back in Arsenal. And the Howl was banished again, so I'm really set up pretty for these later turns here. Like if we look at, you know, how the board state is, right? I'm presenting 9, and if Tom just takes this, he's in Reckless Swing range, so he obviously doesn't want to do that. But blocking with Mask, blocking with Tunic, I mean, those are value pieces that I'm totally fine for him to take off the board here. I still have another block on Skullcap. I still have both blocks on Scabskin, so I'm pretty much up the equipment trade right now. And Tom is in a bit of a rough one. He pushed a lot of damage, but it was through Husk. So you can see the power here. Husk kind of the great equalizer, even when you're as behind as I was in that early game because of the poor Blood Rush play and the even worse like whiff on the banish at the end of that turn. So he's going to block with 2, nullify some of the damage. And Ira on 2 cards is still very threatening. So he's probably still got a decent turn, at least pushing 3, but sometimes even more, sometimes like 8 off the 2 cards here, which I think is what he has. Pretty sure he's got a blue and then the Torn of Tempo. Yep. And I get to Arsenal all over again, so equalized. Kodachi hit coming in, and I'm going to take this because if anything, it just turns off, or rather turns on my Arcanite Skullcap, because it'll put me behind. So most likely I just take this hit here, because once again, the ones that are more worth blocking are that second Kodachi hit, because it has the +1 buff from Ira, and that's how you interrupt the Mask of Momentum draw. So if he decides to not arsenal this card, and with the fact that he already used Snapdragons, his ability to be really explosive in the late game here is hugely, hugely hurt. So honestly, if he plays that last card out, I'm probably still fine with this trade. And of course, second Kodachi should come through. Yep, clearing Zen State. Get out of here, that disgusting token. At least I'm not Viserai, right? That card is so good against Rune Chance. And yeah, gentle reminder about Tunic. Wanna keep the games as high quality as possible. No one at my locals is too much of a tryhard. Everyone just plays mostly to have fun, get better on their own accord. And Tom is one of the better local players. He made, I believe it was top 32 at the Calling Orlando, so he is a good opponent. And there we go. So he does set up that arsenal. Doesn't put that much pressure on me. I'm definitely fine with that. So when you get past these large hands in the mid to late game and you still have gamblers up, this is fantastic for your ability to just dump these extra cards that you didn't have to block with into more damage. So I'm going to get started here with a Ghostly Visit, which is a great card to use when you've got those extra action points. This one didn't come for banished yet, but of course we're gonna try to get it there. All right, 4 coming in. One of the things I really enjoy about Levia is that you pretty much don't have hit effects, so it doesn't make blocking that binary for your opponent where it's, oh, no hit effect, don't block, hit effect, block. You actually just have the raw numbers to make most of your attacks scary. So it's really up to your opponent to decide when they want to take those hits, when they want to block, because they never have to cover up the full amount of damage. So it can just be this very slow leak that you put on your opponent. And that's what we see here, right? Like the Ghostly, just going to plink a damage, and I get to come through with more and more of these swings, potentially reset the Ghostly here. Really, really strong. The Writhing Beast Hulk, the Dominate is really not a keyword that you're chasing all too much. It is cool in the late game, of course. You can just push so much damage with it, especially if you have like the Barragings or the Howls. It can just become a game ender from some really high life thresholds, actually. But in these mid-game scenarios, you can sometimes mess with the fact that your opponent was thinking, okay, I'm going to, cover up a 6 with 2 cards, whatever it is, because that tends to be like a Levia number. But then the Writhing can throw it off, where they only get to block with one of those cards. So he's going to take 3. Pretty happy. My Skullcap is off, but I've still got that arsenal set up. Unfortunately, I didn't get to peek what that was. I don't have my notes this time. This video was a bit too long to watch back twice. So Tom going to lead with the Kodachi, the standard Ira play. And just taking these hits. The only time that Kodachi for 1 is really scary is when you're at potentially 4 life and he can threaten lethal with a Razor Reflex. Those are when you kind of do want to toss in something in front of that Kodachi for 1. But right now, there's just no pressure. So knowing kind of the maximum damage that Ira can put out on these 2-card hands is exactly what we're seeing here. It's about 8. Now, if that Torno Tempo hits, he's going to gain Go again, and he does have a card in hand. So what I'm wanting to do is just prevent this from hitting, because I've planned around the fact that he probably is dealing around 8 damage. That is what Ira tends to do. But then he can punish, or rather the Ira player can punish, when you let them actually hit and expand this ability to just pitch a blue, swing Kodachi, 3rd attack. That's when everything can go haywire. So it is really important to cover up these kind of hits. Right, because he doesn't have anything floating, but if that last card in hand is like an Exude or a Snatch, I mean, he can potentially present lethal and mess up what I want to do here, because if I do cover this up and he puts it in Arsenal, that is honestly fine with me. It gives me another opening to present lethal on him, because that card in Arsenal is, in theory, not going to be a card that helps him block unless he's baiting me here and it is a Flick Flag. So the Ira build, this is kind of what it tends to do, but my Levia build is also very capable of blocking with 2 cards and having very, very strong plays. So just deciding what exact 2 cards I want to put here, or if it is worth the risk of just letting that hit through. Yep, so there we go. It's going to be covering up that entire 5 damage. So there's going to be no go again. No cheekiness coming from Tom. Just goes back to me on the play. And this is not a great return, because I'm pitching a yellow for a Dread Screamer. It is a red Dread Screamer, so it's at least coming in for 6, but obviously if that was a blue, I mean, turn gets a lot better, because potentially can hit the Ghostly Visit, come in with that for 10 off 2 cards, but you can't have everything line up. All I'm looking for here is to turn off Blood Debt. I mean, you just don't want to miss Blood Debt. In a situation like this, you just immediately go to the back foot. And the weird part is your opponent knows that you haven't turned off Blood Debt yet, and they can read you in a situation like this where you have nothing floating, that you probably just take the Blood Debt then. Like if you can't turn it off on that first swing, then they can just plan, oh, all they need to do is not die, and then the Levia takes a ton of Blood Debt, and then I'm just freely back on the front foot. So you just never want to miss Blood Debt. Of course I did, so if I didn't, I'd be at 10 right now. The game would look that much better, but you do take a trickle here and there. It does happen. And so that's how we are here. All right. What did I say? Kodachi for 1. That's how it starts every time. Still no pressure to block it. I mean, of course, a double Razor Reflex could kill me there, but I do have a Sigil in hand, so like in theory, I do have a play around that. I haven't seen any Razor Reflex, so it's potentially what can happen. This is where a Razor could kill me. Once again, Sigils in hand. And just reminding Tom on the Tunic, so he does have the 2 action, or the 2 resources then to spend on the Torrent, or rather the Flying Kick. So that is coming in for 7. No hit effect though. And as far as I can tell, there is just no way in his deck to give that go again. It is a 2 cost, so Razor won't hit it. And he used Snaps. Snaps can't even target that anyway. So this is just a raw damage turn. So because there's no hit effect, I'm free to just cover up what I can, rather than covering up that entire number. I get to preserve. Well, I guess there is hit effect here. The one thing that can happen if I let this hit is that he will draw with Mask of Momentum. But then again, without the Flying Kick having go again, or any way to give it go again, it doesn't really matter to let him draw here. So consideration is either let that draw through. It can dig him closer to something like a Sigil potentially. Or just cover up what I can. So we're definitely going to commit at least the 1 armor piece, and then I'm going to Sigil. So yeah, we are just going to let that hit. I know he can't deal that extra 1 on that attack. There's just nothing he can do. So lines it up perfectly to put me at 1. So I'm banking a lot here on my ability to present an overwhelming amount of damage on this turn, because of course if I just do something mediocre and I put myself at 1, I am in that Kodachi lock scenario. So here starts the turn, and it is another Dread Screamer. This is fantastic. Oh, rather, Gonna check things first. Yeah, that's right. Always check. Make sure that you can't just start with the Howl from Beyond, because that'd be cool. Don't see what I rolled there. I believe it was just the one action point. Otherwise, of course, I would happily put the action point tokens on the board and go about my day. So once again, you're going to roll when the potential action point can threaten 4 or more damage. And of course, I have the Ghostly Visit and Banished. So rolling here is really because that line just becomes, so much more open if I roll the 2 action points. So we're going to just go greedy here. Does not pay off. But what I'm reading from the board here is that if I can't present an overwhelming turn, then perhaps I just lose to the Kodachi lock because I'm at 1 anyway. So really risky to push for a Gambler's Glove there, but that's kind of the read on where the game state is. Kodachi lock is potentially a thing that can get me here, so I just need a good turn. I need an overwhelming turn to put him completely on the back foot, get every card out of his hand, or I'm potentially stuck and I will lose to Blood Debt next turn anyway. But Gambler's not rewarded. I do turn off Blood Debt. Dread Screamer does gain Go again. So that is only a blue though, so I'm only gonna deal 4, only gonna take the 1. But then we're gonna come in with that red Deadwood and draw a discard, and it is a 6, so we can go ahead and trim a miss. Yep, so see, if I hit that extra action point on the Gamblers, then that 1 resource goes to the Ghostly Visit, right? And that would just be fantastic, because the turn would be 16 damage. 16, really, really strong. Of course, that is not what opens up, so instead my turn is just 12, but 12 is really not a math breaker turn, right? He can just do something like this and keep his cards. So we're both at 1 now, and I'm not feeling too great because he did keep, I believe, 1 card and then the card in Arsenal. So I don't have an Arsenal card, so this can just be game over if he goes Kodachi, something else. However, he is at 1, so Reckless Swing is an opening. And once again, the game's gone pretty long, so I've got quite a bit of my deck cycled through, and I haven't seen the Reckless Swing. It's not a card I pitched this game. So it is, once again, a line that opens up. So I always like to... It looks like, yeah, I've got that Reckless Swing, but that doesn't mean you show it immediately. So instead, play things out so the Ira player thinks they have a chance. Resolve that opt. Put it on the bottom. But then, game over. Reckless Swing. So that was a weird game. I don't think I played a lot of the potentially big turns very well. Against Ira, honestly, patience is what wins you a lot of these games. Just set up that arsenal, set up your big turns to break the math at 12 each time, and you'll win the damage trade. But you just can't always sit there patiently, because Ira can just be so frustrating when they just freely swing Kodachi, something else. So played a little fast and loose that game, but the deck has really good trade patterns. We saw the Howl, we saw the Boneyard for a really good 2-card hand play, and then we saw Reckless to seal the deal. A reminder that Ira was on 26 life when the game started because they saw the double sigil super early, and I only saw the 1 sigil, and I saw both sigils, but I took 3 to Blood Debt, so it was like a 26 to 23 life game, and still pulled through. But then we got game 2 here, and this time, of course, Ira gets to choose. Ira's going to go first, see what they can bait out with these Kodachis. So I, doing what I can. I'm even blocking that first Kodachi swing, and this is that issue that I talked about where now if Tom decides to go really wide with the rest of his hand, I just don't have enough cards in hand to block these damage numbers, because the beauty of the Kodachi is that it splits what is a 1 card value, that 3 damage, across 2 hits, the 1 and then the 2. So when they decide to just math out their full turn, and you blocked card on 1 Kodachi, card on the second Kodachi, your other 2 cards are not going to cover up potentially what comes next. So we're talking here, actually, this was a pretty interesting conversation. Tom is wondering whether or not to keep swinging, and we're talking through what he can learn from reading my blocks, which is something important when you're playing against Levia, especially on a turn like this where I'm supposedly free to just block with all the cards I want. And yet I blocked with a 6 on the first attack, and then I blocked with a non-6 on the second attack. And what you can see from being the opponent there is that I've blocked with the card I want to, I've blocked with the card I don't care about, so I'm obviously protecting at least some kind of valuable cards. Otherwise, there would be cards that definitely deserve to be in the graveyard before something like a blue Convulsions. So, right, because more just like 6 fodder I'd always rather throw in than the Convulsions. So he does decide to go hard, and he does force out a red Dread Screamer from my hand. So that was the card I'm trying to protect there when I blocked with the other cards first, but he does push through, and you know, in the Ira matchup, like, yeah, red Dread Screamer, really strong, but the other possibility here is that the cards in graveyard are really rewarding for me. So just going to go ahead and block anyway. And it goes into me, and I have the option to just start attacking here. It's not necessarily correct, so we're going to instead roll Scabs, and I do get the no extra action point, just the 1. So can't do anything too crazy with my turn. But once again, you roll Scabskins normally when you have like these 4-card hands, because you just want to push more damage. You want to push more than 4 on that extra action point, or 4 or more rather. So unfortunately I don't get it, so instead my turn just becomes Barraging. Barraging's still a really good 2-card hand here, but you know, bit of a wasted potential because I've got 4 cards, right? No extra action points. So we're going to go ahead and use the Barraging, and then my turn is just Mandible Claw Swing. So I spent 2 cards, but I had 4, so definitely wasting some value, but I'm going to go ahead and opt here. I do see a Blood Rush, so I believe that's what I keep on top, because in theory I can just immediately launch myself into a good Blood Rush turn. So hard choice here because, you know, Tom, if he wants to stay aggressive, has to block with 2 cards, which he's got. I mean, Flick Flack is definitely a card that Ira, I mean, it only really wants to block with anyway, so going to turn off the Barraging, but that's 2 cards for the 1 card I truly spent, I going back in the deck, of course. So it hopefully also made his blocking a little bit tougher because of the Intimidate. So then I get to redraw here, and my hand is not conducive to that Blood Rush that I set up on top. It is a Sigil and a Ghostly, so this means I need to take it a little bit slower. I don't just get to launch into a Blood Rush because I don't have a 6 in hand to discard. But seeing something like Sigil and Ghostly, those cards are totally fine to want to see early and want to set up. So it just slows down what I wanted to do a bit, but you know, I got closer to cards I want to draw anyway, so works out. He's only leading with a Snatch, so this is a play that tells me he just didn't have 0 cost to pitch with Kodachis. So definitely fine with like a clunky turn from Ira. You barely see it because they have so many blues in the deck, but it can happen. And then of course, if I just don't block the Snatch, he can use Snapdragons. Not sure it's too smart because obviously he just doesn't have pitch, so he's banking on drawing pitch from that card. But here we go. He actually was a little tricky with it. He had the Razor Reflex, so no matter what, the Snatch was going to go through here. But I don't think you ever commit Snapdragon. So really all he's doing here is setting up an arsenal. So not too scared of this. And of course, yeah, sometimes you don't even get cards you necessarily want in Arsenal. He got the Sigil there, so he could have put an Arsenal to play with me a bit, but gonna go ahead and burn it out. My turn here, once again, like I said, I can't really go for the Blood Rush, so instead, just gonna use my own Sigil. Don't you love seeing 2 decks playing that card? And then that attack I put an Arsenal to set up for the Blood Rush. I'm just going to get it out because obviously I'd rather the Blood Rush in Arsenal now, since I know that my Blood Rush turn just isn't going to work out if I play it with that hand. So instead, let's just do the other play, set up the Blood Rush. The one problem with setting a Blood Rush in Arsenal is that you actually can potentially just get stuck with really weird hands that never let you play the Blood Rush, because then you need to have ideally a blue and then 2 6s, since you won't have the attack in arsenal. You want that extra card in hand to hopefully guarantee that you get your big claw extra attack off. So I'm cheering there a little bit because I hit the Ghostly when my graveyard is pretty stacked. So I'm going to take the Blood Debt, but this does open up really good play lines now, because obviously Ghostly sitting there lets me just roll Scabs for that beautiful, beautiful 4 damage. We got Tom drawing back into what Ira wants to see, leading with that Kodachi. So now I do have the Blood Rush in arsenal, so I'm feeling pretty good if that's what my hand can allow me to do. It looks like I have a Fate Foreseen and a blue Barraging, so the Fate Foreseen can be the card I block with. I'm hoping those other 2 cards are 6s. I don't actually know. But of course, if they are, then this is a Blood Rush turn. I'm going to do everything I can. Yep. And, oh, so this changes things. There goes that blue Barraging. But Command and Conquer can do that. Command and Conquer, super strong card to just mess up your ability to use the defense reactions the way you want. So this perhaps means no Blood Rush this next turn. My plans have been foiled. Let's see, the other 2 cards were, I believe, a Hungering Slaughter Beast and another blue, maybe? So rolling because the Ghostly's there, not getting rewarded. So just thinking now, seems like the play is honestly pretty straightforward, but you know, maybe because of that gambler's roll last game, I'm willing to tempt it again. I honestly never recommend that. Please do not do what I did. You really shouldn't roll gamblers in a position like this. I mean, last game I rolled it because I was potentially dead to Kodachi luck anyway, so I had to do what I could to try to bail myself out of that position. But in a situation like this, no, you don't roll gamblers. Come on, Ethan, don't do it. Oh, please don't do it. You know, sometimes we're playing these games, I forget that, you know, the whole point is to put them back on YouTube. Like, sometimes get a little lax with it. Oh, speaking of YouTube, actually, so I am getting better lighting. So there is some glare in these cards, but that will be fixed by probably the next week set of videos. So bear with me. Like I said, there's going to be improvements coming all the time. All the time. Because I'd love for this to just be a really helpful database of Levia games that everyone can reference. So the better they look, the higher quality, the better. So there we go. I did have the blue and a Hungering. So that's why the Scabskins would have been great, because I had the hand that would just beautifully set up that Ghostly Visit, but oh well. The other beautiful thing about rolling Scabs and getting Ghostly is that I could have played the Ghostly first, close the combat chain, and then try to hit it again, which is just fantastic. I mean, you can squeak so much value out of that card. But that's not what opens up. So instead, I'm just going to present 7, and then my arsenal's the Blood Rush, so we're still looking for that combo, and I'm holding the Fate Foreseen in hand. So I'm losing a little bit of value by holding a card instead of playing a card, but that's because Tom really forced my hand with the Command and Conquer, so he is the one that is getting in the way of me playing the cards the way I want here. So hoping that another Command and Conquer doesn't come my way, because I'd love to see that Fate Foreseen played. Gains a lot of value. And then, of course, because I'm trying to play the Blood Rush, the Opt is going to help a ton as well, hoping to peek the top and give me a bit more info as to what I can draw. Ira, once again, Kodachi. And this Howl from Beyond, recent addition to the Blitz list, it's fantastic. Against the Ira here, I played it last game, and it's just a fantastic card, but even the block 2 gains, pretty decent value here, because it's not like I'm wasting block, putting a 3 block in front of a Kodachi. It's totally fine. The Howl really is a card that's going to hurt you in the matchups that are just like balls to the wall aggro, something like the Briar Chain. That's when the 2 block can really hurt you, but You know, having the 1 in the deck is such amazing insurance against some of the slower decks, like Ira can be, like Oldhim, like Bravo. So very happy that it's in the deck. Playability of that card is just fantastic. So here we go, covering up the Torrent. I don't want to give him the go again. And I already saw him use 1 Razor, so because that card doesn't have the combo text, then I'm not afraid of Breaking Scales pushing it over the top, so all I have to do is block the exact 5. And that basically skips Ira's turn. Because Ira wants to block a lot. They have a hard time using like a ton of cards in hand unless they commit the Snapdragons or like have an Exude or have the Razor. So we see Tom, he's keeping a card every once in a while back in hand, and I'm fine with that. That's a little bit of lost value every turn. So I'm rolling Scabs again, and remember, I'm always going to do this when I have that Ghostly there, and this time I am rewarded. So I'm not going to play the Ghostly first, I believe, because at this point I have enough misses that I don't want Ghostly in the graveyard anyway, because I have the Howl, I have, I believe, the Fate Foreseen, potentially one other. I think it was a Barraging Beatdown, or Convulsions, yeah. So I'm not going to play the Ghostly because I don't want to fill the grave anyway. And so by doing it in this order, it's not super obvious that the 1 action point and the 1 floating are necessarily going to the Ghostly. Obviously we know that, but Tom could potentially think that that 1 resource point could go towards like a Boneyard Marauder and Arsenal, something like that. Or potentially Graveling Growl if he thinks we're running it. Obviously we know we're not running that in this build. So then we're following up this way, presenting 11 damage off of 2 cards. Really, really strong. Insanely strong if you think about it, right? Like a lot of decks are trying to hit 12 damage off of like 3-4 cards, and we did 11 off of 2 cards. Fantastic. I mean, you're not going to get to do it every turn, right? Like you can't hit Scabs every turn. You can't have Ghostly set up every turn, but all you need in Blitz especially are like a couple value turns to go your way, and you start to see that you gain a ton of momentum. So here we go with Tom again. He's got that Kodachi into Exude, but I'm at a life total that's really, really comfy. I can just toss the Carrion Husk here because he's probably going to threaten to break it anyway if I just block with like 1 card, or I can get greedy and try to just cover it up with 2 cards and hope that he doesn't pump it twice or whatever it is, and I get to keep the Carrion Husk. So that could potentially be a greedier line. So it's just going to be a question of how well can I use the cards in my hand. And I still have that Blood Rush and Arsenal, and he's only at 6 life, so I'm really trying to just craft the perfect hand to get that attack off and probably just win the game. So I'm staring at the Ghostly Visit in hand, and that's a card I do want out. That card is a detriment when you've got the Blood Rush, because obviously it's a red pitch, so you don't really want to pitch that into the Blood Rush, and of course it's a non-6, so you don't want that card to be in hand when you actually play the Blood Rush out. So I do want to block with that card. So the really safe play, right, would be cover up with the Husk and block with Ghostly. But we'll see. Actually really wonder why I didn't block with the Ghostly. I'm not sure what... Okay, so I guess, slight read in the moment is that perhaps if he does use Snapdragons or the Razor Reflex like he did, I can still get the Ghostly out of hand. But I don't think that's what I was thinking about in the moment. So it is nice, though, that I will get to just block for value still. If I want. Like I said, I'm not holding the cards properly so we can see them on these hand cams just yet. That comes in the next games. So that will get better in time. But for right now, all I can see I have is that Ghostly Visit. Yeah, and this is actually, Tom, for some reason, hadn't seen Pounding Gale in Ira before, and he was asking where the Open the Center was. And I'm telling him, Tom, You know, Ira doesn't really run combo stuff for combo, right? It's for the flick flack ability. It's also for the fact that it's a 1-cost 5 attack, so you get to go off 2 cards. Kodachi, the Pounding Gale, for 8 damage. So just he was wondering where the Open the Center was. I'm telling you, Tom, don't be crazy. You don't run that card. Tom is mainly a Dorinthia / Levia / Lexi player. So I forced him to pilot Ira today. But it's not the hardest deck in the world. So, still caught up on this conversation. It's kind of funny. For all the opponent decks here, I just pulled decks that were either like skirmish winners or decks that were really popular around YouTube. So I believe this Ira list had recently won a skirmish. So just trying to give, the best built decks a go against my Levia here. Unfortunately, that is to say the players aren't necessarily like the most comfortable on the decks. But in Blitz, we play a couple warm-up games and then get into the recording. And since there's no sideboarding, it's really not that hard to just pick up and go in Blitz. So then comes the Blood Rush. So I did hold that Ghostly Visit to instead pitch for the Blood Rush. So by keeping those other 3 cards in hand, I actually am opening myself up to drawing my resources here, and being able to hold the attacks in hand rather than starting with the resources and hoping to draw into the attacks. So kind of doing it inverse there, but I don't draw, I believe, any blues. I think I've got 3 reds in hand and the Beast Within. So this is not going to be a fantastic turn, but in the way health is looking for Tom, it doesn't need to be a fantastic turn. It can just be, a claw into some like 8 power attack, and that will definitely be good enough. Good enough to put Ira on the back foot. So we're just going to lead with the claws. It does hurt to not pitch a blue immediately. It can kind of give them the read that you don't really have what you want here. But he's going to flick flack it. Obviously, this is giving his next card the combo defense bonus. So it's going to give him some pretty good value here. But once again, if he wants to get into reckless swing range, hopefully he's scarred from last game and doesn't want to do it, and hopefully blocks with another 2. Then again, this is a Writhing Beast Hulk, so the only way he could block with 2 would be if that Arsenal card was another defense reaction. So I am going to turn off Blood Debt on this Writhing, and it's going to have Dominate. So not lethal because of the flick flack and his equipment still up, but it's a lot of pressure. He gets to block for 5 and takes 3. This does put him in reckless swing range. So I think we actually won this back. We're talking about whether or not he should have just thrown in the mask, because that way he doesn't die to reckless swing, and instead, yep, gonna do it. Now, if he was tracking my pitch, I actually did pitch a reckless swing early on this game, so he knows that it's not necessarily coming in this next hand, but once again, these hour games go pretty long, so it is coming. The inevitability is there. Now, I was really short a lot of pitch last turn, so I didn't get to really keep anything I wanted to put in Arsenal. I had a Sink Below that I had to pitch, but that would have been an amazing card in Arsenal here. It's unfortunate, but I'm not feeling too bad about where I am still. I still have that Banish Zone set up with Howls and Ghostly Visits, so I have a lot of playables that don't necessarily have to come from hand. The one thing I do have to do, of course, is turn off Blood Debt. So now that he doesn't have Mask of Momentum, you are safe to start taking these Kodachi chips. So he's going to just present as much damage as he can here, for a total of 10 damage. Now, so he goes for the draw card, that's right, because at this point in the game, he's not necessarily going to have a big opening for these Snapdragons anyway, so he's going to go draw a card and just hope that he draws an attack here, because he needs to put on pressure. Because, yeah, look at that. If he draws another card out of my hand, then I'm potentially just going to lose if I don't have the right pitch, the right combo to turn off Blood Debt. So because he did that, I am forced to block with another card here. It's not great, but I did get a little bit lower on that E-Strike block. You kind of do those things on purpose to get the most use out of Skullcap as you can. So I did have to block with Blood Rush, but it's just not playable from where I am at the game right now. So now, unfortunately, I have to play a bit. Yep, there we go. A little bit on the RNG side. I saw my Deadwood in the wrong order this game. You like those early game, you don't like them late game, but you don't always get that going your way, so you do have to just kind of do things blind. So the Deadwood did draw and discard a 6, so the game just would have been over if I didn't. So coming in for 8. Now, of course, he still doesn't want to get to that 2 life threshold, so he's going to block to put himself at 3. I get to draw back up. He's only got the 2 cards here, but they are scary cards because he just gets to go right Kodachi, Kodachi, another attack. So I'm just hoping that it's not 8 damage total this turn. Right, that would be if he had like the Pounding Gale or the Torn of Tempo and the blue 0. But as we see in his hand, he doesn't have that. He has the blue pitch, of course, but his turn is just going to be Kodachi, Kodachi, find center. So that is a 3, 4, 5 damage turn. So it is going to force 2 cards out of my hand again, though. This is those late game Kodachi locks that Levia absolutely hates. So no longer do I have armor. No longer can I keep 3 cards ever, and I don't have an arsenal set up. But one of the beautiful things about Sigil to get you out of these late game locks is that a Sigil can potentially save you from having to block with 2 cards because it just straight heals you 3. So that's what we're going to see here. I heal 3, take 2, and then how fantastic is this into that last attack? It's to the point where he doesn't even want to swing with it because putting me at 1 just does nothing. So he'd rather hold that information, make me fear a Flick Flack or whatever it could be, and puts it in Arsenal. So Sigil, fantastic to bail you from these late game scenarios with Ira. So this actually does let me keep 3 cards. And 3 cards normally means more resources or more attacks. It means that Scab Skins can get me a lot of value. So stuff like the Howl from Beyond, that's where extra resources love to go. We see here, I believe that is a Hungering Slaughter Beast, Barraging Beatdown, and another card there. Yep, so yellow Hungering is going to pay for that Howl from Beyond. And then my blue Barraging is going to pay for an Endless Maw. Amazing. So this is actually a little bit less damage than if I decided to roll Scab Skins for the action point to potentially push the Ghostly Visit instead. Because that would have been 13 damage, whereas this is just 12. But I believe I'm holding the Ghostly Visit because at this point, I'd rather that active for when I draw the 2-card hand of Dread Screamer, because I've only seen 2 Dread Screamers this game. So in these scenarios, it's just not worth going for the Ghostly Visit. The deck's getting really thin, and you know that you've got the Dread Screamers on their way. I believe I've only used 2. So coming in, Blood Debt off, coming in for 12. I mean, no small feat, 12 is fantastic. And not every card in Ira blocks for 3. As we can see here, he's got the Snatch and Exudes in hand, and those block for 2. The blue Flick Flacks also block for 2. Yep, so just counting the Blood Debt I have here. It's definitely live for if I see Doomsday, but we know Doomsday's at the bottom. Doomsday is another fantastic card into Ira, though, because then you do get to block with 3 cards late game. It can bail you out of those Kodachi lock scenarios. But here we go. He's going to do what he can to cover up the damage and still threaten me with lethal. But he can't have it all. This does mean he's going to be in reckless swing range. And like I said, deck is getting mighty thin. We probably got about a third of the deck left. He's lost his Tunic. So here's just the Kodachi threat play, but, ooh, actually, didn't notice that. He didn't have a blue in hand. So then he just gets to swing the one Kodachi. Interesting. Then in that case, I think he should have just blocked with the Exude. That way he stays at 3 so that Reckless doesn't end the game. But he could be doing this to threaten that Arsenal card again. Because in theory, right, well, I don't know what it is, but we know as the viewer that it's the 0-cost Fine Center. So because he pitched the Exude, he actually can present lethal. So that's probably why he kept that. Because in theory, right, you present lethal if you can, but going to Reckless Swing range, telling you, it can get you. So I get to block with 2 cards, preserve my life for another potential subpar play on his end, where I can use my 3 HP to tank something like a Kodachi hit. But, he gets the value there through with the fact that the Fine Center is buffed up to 3, and then he can Breaking Scales. So is going to push a damage through. But I've got the Doomsday. I found it. So that means we're fully through to second cycle here. And I get to turn off Blood Debt. And Plasma Fet is just so good against Ira. Because Ira's going to have to block with 2 cards to not die to the Plasma Fet attack. And then if they just never commit their cards into killing the Plasma Fet, I will get to always block 3 cards on what they're doing in return. And at 2 life right now, I'm even in a stronger position because I can tank that first Kodachi hit to save the 3 cards for their second, and then their third attack, which even if it's a 5, I'll be able to cover up on 3 cards. So Plasma Fet is just a huge value machine in this matchup. So yeah, he's got to block it. Obviously he's at 1, so lethal presented, and he knows he's on a clock. We're so close to the Reckless Swing. I know that the Ivophidia is not next to the Reckless Swing either from when I pitched them, so it is probably in the next hand here. And he just has to kill the Plasma Fet. It's too much of an inevitability. I mean, he went with the E-Strike, so in theory he could have just swung that at me, and I get to just, block with 2 cards, right, and then have the Plasma Fet and 2 cards in hand. And I still have the Gamblers, so that's what we see me do here, and that rolls a 6. Beautiful. Not super likely that I can use all those action points because I don't have Plasma Fet anymore, and he's really what the 6 action points allow you to do. Sometimes, though, you have enough pitch to be able to swing Claws twice on the end of a turn, or Claws Ghostly. So that could be what is opened up here. But what did I say about saving that Ghostly for when you have the Dread Screamer? Oh yeah. That is the guarantee of being able to follow up the Ghostly, or the Dread Screamer with the Ghostly here. The other thing to notice about rolling Scabskins there is that I actually have the chance to miss Engrave here. The game has gone on long enough that I've been blocking so heavily and not necessarily banishing 6 a turn ever. That's really what can get you ahead on controlling your grave again, is if you can get 2 attacks off that banish 3. So I haven't been able to do that this game because of the Ira pressure. So my graveyard is pretty chock full of misses. So I am rolling Scabs there as well, so that if I miss the banish on the Dread Screamer, I still have go again and don't just immediately lose. So he's got to block it. Those 4 breakpoints, it's only a blue Dread Screamer, but those 4 breakpoints really strong in the late game. Still demand 2 cards. So I know that 2 cards are gone, so in theory if I just present 7 damage, he's dead. So we're going to just keep going here. That's another blue Dread Screamer. It's a 4. So once again, it's probably going to demand the 2 cards, and then I can lethal him with anything. And that one's guaranteed to hit because I've trimmed the grave now. So that is giving me go again. I still have 2 action points. Can't do anything with 2 action points and only 2 resources. I don't have double Ghostly. One's still in the deck because I pitched it on the Blood Rush turn. So Oh, yeah, okay, so actually he flick-flacked on the last attack, so this does let him cover up that attack. So now I do get to swing in with the Ghostly, though, and there's no... Unless that's a red flick-flack. Yeah, he can't block that with that one card, so... It's just the CNC. He's going to take the 1. And it's going to be game. Come on. Put it down, Tom. Take that L. Oh, yeah. And look at that. That is a pretty long series then versus Ira there. But hope you all enjoyed. There were some cool plays that came up.